Welcome, everybody. My name is Gabe Saint. This is Crown and Country. New show. Excited to get this started. Been in the works for a little while, mostly just debating on whether to do it or not. Finally decided just to do it for a lot of reasons, but we'll get into that. But my name's Gabe Saint. I am a TPUSA chapter leader at the University of Wyoming. I've been leading the chapter for like 3.5 years, been involved for about 5 years. I'm now a graduate student. But doing it a long time. Just to be clear, this show is not affiliated with TPUSA or anything like that. This is my own independent thing, but obviously inspired from my work that I do with the organization. Just a few things before we get rolling into the main intro. This is a family-friendly show, so there won't be like any cussing or stuff like that. Might be a little hard for me at times because some of the politics deserves a little bit of that kind of language, but yeah, that's me. That's all there really is to know. We're just going to talk about politics and stuff. I named the show Crown and Country for a few reasons. Partly because my buddies and we debated for like 6 months on what to name the show, whether to name it after like my name or like something goofy like that, play off my last name, or name it after like my favorite video game, which I'm not going to spoil what that is, um, or just whatever. But we ultimately decided to do this inspired from my church denomination, which is for Christ, Crown, and Covenant. You can look that up. Pretty cool history with that slogan. But that's what it is. And it kind of also captures my three main principles that I want to use to guide the politics of the show, which is uh, that Jesus Christ is the sovereign Lord of all. He ordains all governments, all nations, and it is the duty of all government, and especially governments that govern a populace of Christian people, to orient their government towards God, towards what is true, good, and beautiful. And we want to do that in America and all our various states. We have our country, and many of our states are founded on distinctly Christian principles inherited from thousands of years of our faith. So there's that. Then the second one's basically that's just Christ is King. Second one is America first, the ideal that we ought to put the interests of the American people, the American nation, the empire first. I think that is the foremost duty of any government, is to prioritize the interests and the welfare, the prosperity of their own people. And then the third one, not so much captured by the name of the show, but which is basically just free speech. That's kind of been a recurrent theme throughout my very short political career. We ought to debate the hardest issues with open and rigorous discourse. We should refine each other with discourse. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit today with some of the stuff going on the internet with various influencers and stuff. Probably won't mention them by name, but you guys will all get the gist. But yeah, going into why I really want to do the show ultimately is because of Charlie Kirk. I met Charlie a little over 3 years ago at a fundraiser in Jackson, Wyoming. We had the opportunity to sit down with them for a while and just kind of talk about some of the things my chapter and I were experiencing on campus regarding, free speech issues, DEI issues, men and women's spaces and whatnot, the stuff that most campuses struggle with. And he really encouraged us to be leaders in not only in our campus, but in the state that we reside. And we really tried to do that with our chapter. We've been a very successful chapter. Um, and he's kind of just he was around my entire time with Turning Point, and still is obviously in my heart. And I'm still with the organization, and I love the organization. I'm very, very proud to be a part of it. Um, Charlie, he gave me Student Patriot of the Year award at America Fest in 2024 for the work that my group and I have done on campus, which is the most prestigious award that a Turning Point student can get. And he came to UW just last April, just a little under a year ago. He came on April 24th. And that was amazing. That was a dream come true. We worked a long time to get Charlie here. We're a campus of only like 10,000 people, so that's a pretty big deal. And it was awesome. It was huge. Like the second biggest political event in our state in the last 10 years, other than like Trump's rally when he was campaigning against Liz Cheney back in, what was that, 22, Mr. Producer? 2022? Something like that, yeah. But anyway, And, Charlie, he was just always about discourse. I'm not going to be one of these people that starts a show and, will claim to know what Charlie would say in the current political situation. Ultimately, don't know. We can look back at the things he said to kind of get a gist, take some of his wisdom, which I think we should do. But I'm not going to be one of these people to claim to know what he definitely would say. Well, the only thing that I know 100% for sure that he would encourage each and every one of us to do is just to talk about the issues, talk about especially the hard ones. And so that's what we're going to do. In a family-friendly way, of course. And the other reason, let's kind of get into our first topic. We're going to talk about this free speech crisis that the conservative movement's kind of experiencing in the current moment. And it's very discouraging. It's very disheartening as a young person. Basically, young people need to step up. They need to be starting their own shows. And you've seen a lot of young people do this. Because like these old heads, so these people that we grew up watching, it's just, they're hard to watch anymore. They say the most outrageous stuff about each other, and it's just not even true. They don't actually talk about each other's points. They just want to tear each other down. It's not about refining each other. It's not about keeping a coalition and making the coalition as strong and powerful as it can be. Because the best way to do that is to debate the issues and refine each other. Have a little bit of humility. Figure out who's wrong and who's right. Point out the sources of influence and power and refine those too and disassemble them if needed. But ultimately, you keep the coalition together. And we're not doing that. The future's looking very bleak for the conservative moment if you just look at our leaders. So young people got to step up, because you go to like these college Republicans, TPUSA, Young Americans for Liberty, and some other organizations. They're the only ones having the real debates, and they're the only ones that have real diversity of thought. Like if you go to any Turning Point chapter meeting, you're going to have like your handful of libertarians, you're going to have your populists, you're going to have your hardline America firsters. You're going to have your MAGAites, and you're going to even have like old school Reaganites. But they disagree. They refine each other. They debate the issues, but ultimately they stick together. And it's about pushing the envelope on issues that really matter to the youth. And I think generally across the board, the youth are in agreement on a lot of those issues, which we'll kind of get into today as well. But like some of these live streamers, YouTubers, there's people on Rumble, podcasters, you can't even watch them anymore. Really, the only show that I know my crew and I can watch is like the Charlie Kirk show. And and really the only reason that we can watch them is because it's just not like this constant soap opera. They just kind of like talking about the issues of the day, interviewing people, getting takes from people, a little bit of analysis, even getting the youth take, which I think that's probably the only show that's probably doing that. Would you agree with that, Mr. Producer? Yeah, Mr. Producer says yeah. And so that's about the only thing we watch. And they're kind of honest. And so I appreciate that. But everybody else, I was just with my buddies. We were eating the hamburgers and we were watching Deadliest Catch, because like there is just no good political content for us to watch anymore. We're like total boomers watching Deadliest Catch and eating hamburgers. And you know what? That just kind of shows the political state that we're in as conservatives. But yeah, these guys can't talk to each other. I remember Charlie Kirk show would have been like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. They brought in this constitutional lawyer. His name was Dr. Barnes or something like that. I can't even remember. But I think he was like constitutional scholar or lawyer or something like that. They brought him on just to talk about the Iran war and some of the possible electoral effects that could happen because of the Iran war, particularly with the youth. Anybody with a political IQ of 1 knows that this war is a political loser for Gen Z, really anybody under the age of 35. It's kind of a political loser for our farmers. They can't get fertilizer right now. It's so expensive. And people that are filling up their gas tanks. I know that I was kind of ambivalent about it. Not ideologically, but at least just like whatever. If you voted in the last election, you kind of knew that it was going to happen and just hoped it wasn't going to happen. Anybody that's filled up their gas tanks, they're pretty upset about it. It costs $160 to fill up my pickup, and that's ridiculous. Should not be like that. There's been some new developments today, of course. Hopefully that there's actually peace. They open up that strait, get oil moving, get other products moving through the Strait of Hormuz. So be in your prayers that God works a wonder through this little situation we got going. But anyway. Andrew Colvett and Blake Neff, the guys on the Charlie Kirk show, they brought this guy on, talk about the Iran war, the political situation, and they really just talked about that. That's it. And like totally reasonable things that, if you are a political person and you're working, in Republican politics, that's something that you're looking out for. If you are a person running for office and a big part of your voter base are young people, the Iran war is, you're going to have to be, I don't know, a little, you're going to have to work with that topic in a way to get you elected, get those young people on board, because they're just not on board right now. And that's all they were talking about. And that was just, they just put that out into the ether, let people chew on that. And then you get all these big conservatives all over X and YouTube and Rumble and Instagram. And they're just saying, how dare you platform or promote these people? How much have we heard that? That when somebody interviews somebody, it's promoting and platforming. You can't do that. They're evil. And I'm just kind of like, what happened to our movement? How long did we fight through COVID, through the Biden administration, through the big tech censorship in the first Trump administration to get free speech online, to really talk about the hard issues, just to turn on each other like that? I don't understand that at all. We cannot talk about foreign policy. We can't talk about immigration. We can't talk about the state of the demographics within like conservative politics. Nobody wants to talk about that. We can't talk about all these things, or you get where people call you out for promoting or platforming people. And what happened to the attitude that every single conservative, no matter what kind of conservative you were, where you came from, of this attitude, where you had this attitude that I will debate anywhere, on anything, at any time. That used to be the attitude. I know when I was a freshman coming into college, when Turning Point was getting huge on the national scale, and you still get this today with the young people that join these clubs, their attitude is, I may not know anything, but I'll debate anybody anywhere. And that was the attitude they had. They didn't care what it was. And that used to be all the big influencers too. I'll talk to anybody, anywhere, or at least 99% of people. And now it's not like that. Now we won't even entertain ideas. We won't even entertain ideas that we disagree with. We just can't do that. And I want to know what happened. I don't understand. I don't think it's good for the movement, because the easiest way to learn about things is to talk them out and to entertain different perspectives and really break down other people's ideas, flesh them out. We just don't have that anymore. Nobody's talking. It's like everybody's now in their sectarian camps, and anybody that's not in your sectarian camp is like an evil demon, or whatever it is. And it's just like these guys on the Charlie Kirk show, they're just getting perspective, and that's all they're doing. That's what we should be doing, is getting as much perspective as possible, because the only way to make our movement stronger is to keep making our ideas better, which can only happen through dialogue and debate. And just chewing on ideas. And people aren't even allowed to chew on ideas anymore, and you get frowned upon. And that's why I'm part of Turning Point, because I think it's one of the few organizations in the nation that allows you to explore any idea unhindered. And so I think it's a real sad thing that is the state of the conservative movement. Hopefully we can get past that. It's really a bummer. But anyway, we'll get into our big topic for the evening, or for this episode. I don't know when this is going to air, but we're going to try to get it uploaded ASAP. Is this immigration. There's been a couple of things that have happened in the last week that have blown up the internet. There's been pretty good discourse about it. I think it's kind of been an exception to the discourse in recent months. But the Supreme Court recently there was oral arguments before the Supreme Court over birthright citizenship. I think it was on Trump's first day in office, when he got inaugurated on January 20th last year. He signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship for illegal aliens who have babies on American soil, and he ended birthright citizenship for temporary residents, I believe. I think that was the other part. Got sued. It worked its way through the court system, made its way up to the Supreme Court. They entertained it, and it doesn't look good. And a lot of people think that the conservative, or I shouldn't say the conservative, but some people on the right, because there are some conservatives that are just like, still think it's 1988, when Ronald Reagan in his farewell address said, anybody from anywhere can be an American. I think that's probably one of the most destructive speeches in American history, because that's just not true. Not anybody from anywhere can be an American. That's just an axiom. I, as an American, if I moved to China, could not go to China and just be Chinese. I'd still be an American. I do not. We'll get into that. But anyway, yeah, so they heard the oral arguments. It's not looking good. And before people say that like this is a super like this some of the position that I'm going to take and a lot of people in the right wing space have taken is like super radical. In 1993, the Democrats in the Senate, I think it was Senator Harry Reid. I think he became the majority Democrat leader. I can't remember. I think he did. He got way up there though. Um, he introduced a bill to end birthright citizenship then. And if you remember, like back in the day, the Democrats actually cared about the working man. They actually cared about wages. They actually cared about the quality of labor in this country. And they understood back then that unfettered mass immigration is not good for the American worker. It is not good for keeping stable wages. It's not good if you want wages to keep going up with inflation. They understood that. And along the way, the wokers, the wokists, they took over the party, and instead of advocating for the lower middle class and the lower class, it just became oppressor versus oppressed ideology that you know we all know how that works. Is that Americans are now oppressors and illegal immigrants are the oppressed in our own country. But anyway, so why is this birthright citizenship such a big deal? Well, the 14th Amendment, after the Civil War, after the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, the 14th Amendment gave slaves and their children citizenship. That was the purpose of the 14th Amendment, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. Over time, I don't know at what point, but at some point, the Supreme Court of the United States interpreted that to give citizenship to anyone born on American soil. Anybody from anywhere. You could just come here. If you were birthed onto some soil, whether that's in America or on a United States military base even, or in an embassy, you are an American citizen, even if your parents aren't American. Even if you have no relation to the country, like at all, you are American. So I think my foremost issue is that birthright citizenship, by granting citizenship to anybody born here, kind of makes being an American nothing. You just have to be born on the ground to be an American. You're telling me that there's nothing that has to be inherited through heritage to be an American. There's no customs, conventions, tradition that you must get from your parents and your grandparents to be an American. I know people that have been in states for a long time. My family's been in Wyoming for a long time. There are certain things about being a Wyomingite that makes you clearly distinct from like even a Coloradan or a Nebraskan. And especially from somebody from either the coast. You come out to Wyoming, people come to Wyoming, and we just don't drive as fast. We're a lot slower. We're more friendly. We'll talk to you on the street. You go somewhere else, it's not like that. It's just kind of the way our culture is. Entire counties will take weeks off work to go help all the local ranchers with their brandings. That's just kind of how it works. If you're in my college town for 3 months out of the year, you ain't getting out because the roads are closed because the winters are that bad. This year is an exception. And that's just how it is. It's very distinct. If you go to New England, the states over there, they have very distinct cultures. It's almost alien to people out west. If you go to California, it's very distinct. You go to like people like think like Texans and Wyomingites are the same thing, but that's just not true. I go to Texas or I meet a Texan, and it's just like, bro, this guy's not even from the same country. I just don't get it. We're just not the same, and that's okay. I think that's a beautiful thing. And that goes with the nations too. Is that each nation has its own distinct culture, and that's a very beautiful thing. I love that Japanese people from Japan have their own traditions and customs and ways of doing things. Same with like Chinese people and Frenchmen and the Brits. And wherever you come from, they each have their own distinct cultures, their own distinct traditions. Those are beautiful things. Those things should be preserved. In America, we're losing that. If anybody can just come here and be an American, it means nothing to be an American. You don't have to inherit anything. You don't have to come from, like a line of Americans. You don't have to, I don't know, just have these things that make you, that cause you to relate with the other people in your community. You could just come here from wherever in the world, move to, the middle of Kansas, be born there, and I don't know, what do they call Kansas people? Kansanites? I don't know. They probably don't even know who, Dorothy is from The Wizard of Oz. That's like based out of Kansas, I think. I don't know. I haven't watched that movie before. I'm Gen Z. But anyway, they just have no relation to us, and I think they should have to be able to. Because since like Ronald Reagan, basically, you boiled down an American to someone that just comes here and takes takes advantage of the economic opportunities. How many times have we heard people say, the great thing about America is that it's the land of opportunity. Okay, great. I agree that it's the land of opportunity, but for who? For who? The whole world? You're telling me that that our Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, all the things that generations of Americans have built over a long, long time was for the whole world? No, I think those things were for our people, for our land, for our heritage, for our posterity. That's what the preamble of the Constitution says. Those things were made for us. I don't think Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Ben Franklin, when they were writing the Declaration of Independence, thought, well, like, wow, these are great things that we're going to get from all these different smart people like John Locke and John Calvin and these other great Protestants, mostly Presbyterians, by the way. A lot of these ideas, Lex Rex, Samuel Rutherford. But actually, a little side note, not a lot in like the Declaration of Independence or Constitution actually comes from John Locke. That's like a 1960s reinterpretation of the founding era, that all of a sudden, America was founded based off of Lockean liberalism. That's just not true at all. At all. But anyway, I don't think that those guys wrote the Declaration of Independence, and I don't think that they later signed the Constitution thinking that, wow, we are going to build something here for the whole world. No, they did not do that. They wanted freedom for their own people. They wanted liberty for their own people. They wanted to build an empire for their own that can compete with the other empires of Europe. They wanted to secure their own prosperity. They wanted to secure their own futures. They wanted to determine their own destinies, and that's what they wanted. He wanted to build something new. And it was not for the whole world. And so ever since like Ronald Reagan, and I know like a lot of people love Reagan, and granted, I think he was great and necessary for his time in a lot of ways, combating communism domestically and abroad. I think we can all thank him for that. But I mean, when it comes to like understanding what an American is, that idea that we've, chanted for 40 years as conservatives just not working. It's not working, and it's not good. It used to mean something to be an American. And, there's that old clip of that old World War II vet, and he's like basically crying. He goes, I don't even know what the heck I fought for. This country's gone to hell in a handbasket. That's what he says. And it's just like the saddest thing to watch. Like those guys storming the beaches of Normandy for another country, for other countries, for like nothing. They went and defeated evil for nothing, just for them to not even recognize their own home that they defended. I think that's just a sad thing, that we defeated communism for the whole world for nothing, just to import the third world. I think that's just a dishonor to our ancestors. So we need to get back to this idea that an American is a distinct person, and America is a distinct nation among the nations of the world. We need to uphold basically the order that God set up in the story of the Tower of Babel. Everybody was congregating in that one place where they were building that big tower. God didn't like it very much. He said, no, God created diversity. I know that word's crazy coming from a right-wing guy, but that's what he did, is he created diversity. He gave people their own languages, their own cultures. And, out of those distinct peoples, they built traditions and nations and empires, and they competed with each other. They refined and ultimately made the world as we know it today. And we need to preserve that diversity of the globe. The nations create diversity. We need to preserve these cultures, because cultures compete. They make good things. They make beauty. Empires compete and make beauty. I think that's a good thing. You get conflict every once in a while, and you'll just kind of have that. There ain't really nothing you can do about it. That's human nature. But I tell you what, the worst kind of conflict is when you have a mass immigration into a country, and there's this demographic makeup, and it's so extreme that ultimately you get violence. And you get that every time, no matter where you look in human history. That's what happens, is civil war, violence. And that's a way nastier kind of violence than you get when it's two nations going to war with each other. There's nothing more brutal than brothers killing each other. So we can't let that happen to our country. And so it's not like xenophobia or these other things, when we want to like institute an immigration moratorium. That's what I advocate for. No, it's about preserving American sovereignty and preserving American identity, and not succumbing to this like globalist and this progressive and this and ultimately in a lot of ways a libertarian idea that there really is nothing distinct about nations, is that it's just individuals. The world's just individuals. Anybody can become anything that they want. That's not true. I was born in Wyoming and I became a Wyomingite. I was kind of born into that. It was handed down. I really didn't have a choice over the matter, and that's how it is. We are not just individuals. There are all these outside influences that make us who we are. And we need to preserve those things that make Americans distinct among the peoples of the world. Because America has been a net benefit of the world. I mean, we've freed the world from fascism and Nazism and communism and all these other isms. We've done all these great things, brought prosperity. We've opened trade routes. You know how benevolent we are that we just like throw our navy out into the oceans all over the world and protect everybody's trade. We are like such a good nation to the world. And the only way you can preserve that benevolence is by keeping that identity that made that benevolence possible. So I really hope that the Supreme Court rules the right way. I don't think that they will, sadly. And if that's the case, we need to elect a bunch of congressmen and elect a president that'll get a bill passed or something passed. Or just get a president that will just like do something cool about it, because like something needs to happen, or states need to do something, because the biggest threat to our country is mass immigration, and that is true. The second thing is this thing that kind of popped up today or yesterday, I can't remember, but this Dignity Act. I know that it was introduced in 2025 too. I don't think it really went anywhere. I don't think it made the headlines that it has, today and yesterday. But this would basically give amnesty to any illegal immigrant that came to this country before Joe Biden was president. So that's at least anywhere from 25 to 40 million people. That's a lot of people to just give amnesty to. And that's a very scary thing. It's kind of crazy they call it the Dignity Act. Dignity for who? For Americans or for other people that broke into our country, that basically invaded our country, took advantage of our economic opportunity zone, have done little to like become American. And here's something that really bothers me. Well, they're contributing to the system. Paying taxes makes you an American. That's like the most un-American thing. I think that's a silly argument. Oh, they contribute to Social Security. That makes them American. So that's crazy. That's a very weak argument. But these people do nothing to relate to the people around them, the people that have been here for generations. They move into towns. They make it into something different. They destroy communities. They disrupt school systems. They implode school systems. That's a huge problem in some of these big cities that nobody wants to talk about. And all these things are happening. And so they call it the Dignity Act. Well, it's definitely not dignity for Americans, because you know what would do American goods? The 40 to 50 million deportations that we asked for when we elected Donald Trump in 2024. He has a mandate to do that. Still does. He's still the president. And so I really hope that we really get that ramped up. And we do a little bit more, we do it a little bit smarter than what we've been doing, how we've been doing it. And so that happens. I think it's like 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats that have sponsored the bill. I don't know. It might pass, honestly. I don't know. I don't think the president will sign it. I doubt he will. But I mean, you can bet that almost every Democrat in the House will vote for it, and you already have 20 Republicans, so that beats the Republican majority. I think we only have the majority by 1, 2, 3 seats, something like that. It's not that many. And in the Senate, I mean, you can probably bet that you get every single Democrat, other than John Fetterman, who's like you don't ever know how he's going to vote. But you can bet that almost every Democrat in the Senate will vote for that. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, maybe some other Republicans will vote for it too. Mitch McConnell will probably vote for that. Maybe Dan Sullivan out of Alaska. I don't know. He might lose a Senate seat. That's kind of crazy. Go look at those polls. So yeah, not good. Not good for our country. Dignity Act. Well, that's really all I had to talk about, I think. Lots of stuff going on. But yeah, I'm going to take a drink of coffee real quick. I'm thirsty. Yeah. There's lots of debates going on. I think one of the most interesting debates that I see, particularly on X, is that there's kind of been a spark in the role of Christianity in politics and government. And this is a debate that like I know that I've been having with all my friends and stuff. And there's this weird, interesting thing happening with Gen Z and like conversion to Christianity or like taking the faith seriously again. Um, I think a lot of like young guys, young people grew up in like your typical evangelical, non-denominational church, which is great. And then, ultimately they find that there's something missing. And there is. I know I felt like that there was something missing. There's something like deep and meaningful missing in the church. You go to church, you get your like rock band style concert. Um, you get like a very feel good sermon. And you get all these things. It's just very shallow. It doesn't feel really real. It doesn't feel old. And so, like these young people, they start investigating like the faith, and like we've seen huge convert. Like Easter was on Sunday, and I was just like baffled by how many people were baptized into the Catholic Church over Easter. And there's a lot of people going to Orthodoxy. Now that's one like Catholicism. I vibe with for the most part. I mean, I obviously have some doctrinal issues which I can talk about here in a little bit, but it's very interesting that like Orthodoxy. Imagine being like some dude from Montana. You never met a Greek Orthodox person from like Turkey or Russia or Ukraine or something like that. You just like convert to Orthodoxy. And like at least with like Catholicism, like there's schools of scholastic thought, and like it's very Western in its thinking. You can get like a systematic thought out of it. Then there's Orthodoxy, and everything's very mystical. They have this weird thing with the Holy Spirit that I don't quite understand, which ultimately caused the schism. And that's what you convert to, and like they don't even convert to it out of like the doctrine. They convert because of the aesthetic, and it is beautiful. I mean, you got to give them that. The aesthetic of the Orthodox Church is beautiful, and it is very appealing. It's old, it's ancient, and like the Catholic Church has that too. I mean, for me, I remember at a time in my life when I was exploring Catholicism, that was like a huge thing, and I ultimately it was the doctrine of justification that really kept me from converting to Catholicism. Like for me and a lot of my buddies, they either converted to Catholicism or like me and one of my closest friends and some others became like a very traditional Protestant. I became Presbyterian. Like I went and I delved into like American history, and like 80% of the founding population, according to like Lorraine Botner and George Bancroft, who founded Annapolis and is a premier American historian. A huge portion of the American population time of the founding was actually Calvinist. And, you get all like these evangelicals, and they talk about this country was founded as a Christian country, and so I was doing my senior thesis, like okay, I wanted to prove with my senior thesis that America was founded as a Christian country, and ultimately I found that it was founded as a Christian country, but not the kind of Christianity we got today in America, the predominant Christianity in America. It is not like this evangelical um, and like I'm not anti-evangelical. I'm evangelical. I believe that we should evangelize and stuff. But like the culture and the type of theology, the type of church services we have, they were all Calvinists in their doctrine. Even the Episcopalians, they adhered to their 39 Articles of Faith back then. And there's a lot of Presbyterians, Dutch Reformed, German Reformed, Puritan/Congregationalists. Those are all Calvinists. They were just Calvinist in their thinking, and like every Protestant up until the Methodists with John Wesley, and the Baptists who later became prominent. Those guys from right around the end of the founding era into like the Second Great Awakening, those exploded. You kind of saw like this free market, this individualistic mentality enter American Protestant theology, and you find that there was just kind of a change up from the founding Christians, who were largely Calvinistic Protestants, traditional Protestants. And like a good founder to look at is like John Witherspoon, who was a Presbyterian minister. He founded Princeton. And he was James Madison's mentor. It's kind of odd that we have the form of Republican government that we have today. Because James Madison wrote the Constitution. It's very similar to the ecclesial government of the Presbyterian Church. It's very Republican, and it's not surprising, coming from being a student of John Witherspoon. And so I ultimately became Presbyterian because of that. I come to find out that, wow, actually most of the theology and doctrine, the ecclesiology that we have today, the way we do things as Christians in America today is nothing like the Christianity that was present in 1776 and in 1787 when the Constitution was written. Um, and so, yeah, just seeking these older forms, and you see the youth doing that. They want something old and true and beautiful. And now we have this debate. Like, okay, all the youth, they're uh, coming to have all these beliefs. They're converting to these older forms of the faith. And now there's this, what do you do with that politically? What is the role of government? And that's very interesting. My Catholic brothers and sisters, like I love my Catholic friends mostly because they all acknowledge that the reason America is the way it is because of its distinct Protestant nature or character. And like Catholicism, I don't know how much it vibes with that. But I do think it is necessary. I do like that there's a lot of people coming, at least to Catholicism. It's Christianity in most cases. So yeah, there's this debate. Should government promote true religion, especially with Trump's Truth Social on Sunday? Everybody freaked out about it. Like, wow, this was so unpresidential, and I'm kind of like, since when was the president Trump? Since when was President Trump presidential? He's always kind of been tacky, and he says things at the wrong time. He probably shouldn't have said what he said on Easter, but you saw all these people, sparked a debate like about Islam and certain things, and I was just like, whatever. But anyway, neither here or there. But should government promote true religion? And one thing that's been a big gripe among like leftists in particularly is that like you see like the DHS account and the Department of Labor and like even the White House, they promote like these very Christian messages, like for God and country and, on Easter. I mean, it's just, I've never seen that before in my life. It's very, very Christian. And people don't like that very much. But I think that's the right thing to do. I think that it is the duty of government to promote what is true, good, and beautiful. And Christianity is true. I'll put it in a syllogism. I don't know if it's a very good syllogism, but I think it is. I think everybody could generally agree that it is the duty of government to promote the common good. I think everybody believes that. The government should provide what is best for the most amount of people and promote what is virtuous. So there's the first one. There's the first premise. The syllogism is two premises, if you don't know what that is, that reach a conclusion. Premise one, government should promote the common good. Number two, Christianity is the only true religion. Therefore, government ought to promote Christianity for the common good. And what that means, there's this big debate. There's this, this common saying, don't legislate morality. Well, morality is always legislated. Christians are the only group of people that aren't allowed to like force their morality or whatever on the common population. But everybody else can, though. They can do it. And nobody whines about that. So I do think Christians should get in government and they should promote their ideals and those good things, not only for the sake of, Christians, but for the sake of those who hate Christ too. Part of being Christian is suffering for even those that hate us. And, if we got to go in and do what is right, outlaw things like abortion, fix this transgender mess, outlaw like things like porn and, get drugs off our streets, enforce borders. And, that's a topic people say that's not Christian. If we take what I was talking about earlier about, God setting up a world with nations and borders, that's clearly a biblical thing. I mean, go to the book of Numbers. And, before people say, well, this kid's only advocating for only white Anglo-Saxon Protestants can be American. That's not true. America is very unique, kind of like a lot of other empires in world history, where we've never had a very homogenous population in the sense that it's just been one clearly distinct people. Even the original 13 states were not like that. Like you went from Pennsylvania to New York to Virginia to Georgia. Each state was very, very different. They had different religions. It was all Christianity, but they were different denominations. They were very different. And each state, even to this day, is very different. And we're very imperial in our nature. So we've always had a very broad population. But there's always been the certain things that unite the whole population. And so I'm not saying there can only be one group of people. People can come here. It's depending on where you come from, it's a lot harder over generations to, come into the American culture, to become American. For other groups of people from certain places, it's easier. That's just the way it is. We're not all the same, and that's okay. That's actually a good thing. So before people accuse me of that, I just want to brush that aside. Such a lazy argument. But that's what the left does. That's that they make lazy arguments. They paint you as a racist, as xenophobe, whatever kind of ism or phobe, and then they leave it at that. They won't even address your arguments. And sadly, a lot of people, are so lazy and dishonest that they don't even see past that. But that's why we have to have discourse. Put as much stuff out there as possible to break down those things. But anyway, yeah, so we should go in and promote Christian things, and I encourage all young people to do that, especially young men right now. We're becoming a lot more right-wing, reactionary, not just conservative. I mean, conservative generally, but we're actually becoming a lot more reactionary. And before people don't say things, I'll define that for you, because people tend to think like reactionary means just you react to things all the time. It's not what it means. Reactionary means that you're advocating for certain things to be put in place, institutions to be built that don't exist anymore. Like a conservative preserves things in his society, institutions and laws and whatnot in his society, politics in his society. The reactionary says those things don't exist anymore and we want to bring them back. That's what a reactionary is. So young men are becoming very right-wing. They're becoming reactionary. And they're still conservative broadly. There are things that we are conserving. There are even things we're progressive on. Free speech, actually, the right wing is very progressive on free speech. If you look at the history of free speech in this country, was not a thing. I say that's one of the few things that's developed since the founding that has progressed into something actually a lot better than was at the beginning. There really wasn't free speech at the beginning, guys. And there really wasn't free speech until 50, 60, 70 years ago. So that's one of the few things out of modernity that we've gotten, which is really good. 100 years ago, I would not be sitting here and doing this. 200 years ago, I probably would have been locked up in a Puritan prison or something. But yeah, so we should go in. And so as these young people become more right-wing, you're going to see them get into, the institutions, into the universities, into government, and other places. And I think that's a good thing. So hopefully that debate keeps going. I think ultimately some of the older generations are going to have to reconcile the fact that there is, some separation between the generations. If you're going to win elections, you got to win that vote. And that means you kind of have to, might have to, adopt some of those positions. And I think you probably will have to. That's all I got for you guys today. Try to do the show. I'm not going to do it all the time. I'll try to do it as consistently as possible, but I'm kind of just going to do it whenever I want, whenever I have something to talk about. Probably when something really makes me angry, because kind of this free speech stuff and immigration has had me and all my buddies worked up. I know it's had the whole country worked up. But this is going to be posted on YouTube, so subscribe to our show on YouTube. We're going to get it uploaded to an MP3 format on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Podbean, Spotify. That might take a little longer, but it's definitely going to be on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. We have Facebook too, for some of the people above the age of 40 that do not have Instagram. Hey, and that's okay. You don't have to get Instagram. I actually prefer it if you don't get Instagram. In a lot of ways, you ruin the algorithm. No offense. But yeah, subscribe to our show. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, email us at crownandcountrywithgabesaint@gmail.com. Sorry for the very long email. But I didn't want to you enter in your email and they give you a bunch of ones and they were all horrible. It was cc and gs@61@gmail.com. And I was just nobody's going to remember what that is. So the very long crownandcountrywithgabesaint@gmail.com. Send us some questions. I might answer them. I might not. Depends on what they are. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your evening.